I'm Sienna. I'm 32 years old, and half a year ago, my own mother and father dragged me into civil court. They sued me for $682,000 over a suburban four-bedroom house I had absolutely zero part in purchasing. Behind my back, they had bought my sister Melody her dream home and fraudulently slapped my name on the mortgage as a cosigner. I didn't know a thing about it until a collections notice showed up in my mailbox. When I called my mom, my hands literally trembling as I demanded to know what was going on, she casually dropped a sentence that still haunts me. She said, "We decided you should pay." When I told them absolutely not, they didn't backtrack. They didn't apologize. Instead, they hired a lawyer. My sister Melody even agreed to take the stand and testify against me, claiming I had made some binding verbal contract during a Christmas dinner 2 years prior. But my family was missing one crucial detail. They had no idea I possessed a specific digital folder I'd been maintaining for years, a safety net of evidence I kept for the exact moment I needed to prove my reality wasn't a fabrication. Before we step into that courtroom and I reveal exactly how this all went down, please take a quick second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely resonate with these kinds of real-life stories. Also, I'm so curious where you are tuning in from today and what time it is in your part of the world. Let me know in the comments below. To make sense of how I ended up as public enemy number one in my own bloodline, we have to rewind. Growing up in the Brennan household, there were two girls, and it was no secret who held the title of the favorite. Melody was the undisputed golden child. She was radiant, charismatic, and always had the perfect anecdote ready for family gatherings. She'd giggle at our dad's terrible jokes, eagerly assist mom with dinner, and had this magical ability to make every aunt and uncle feel like the most important person in the room. Her teachers praised her. People in the neighborhood adored her. She was the trophy child my parents paraded around at Sunday service. Then there was me. I was the introverted, hyper-focused sibling. I always favored spreadsheets over chit-chat and statistics over neighborhood gossip. While Melody racked up endless praise, I quietly racked up perfect grades. It wasn't even because I desperately wanted their validation, it was just that numbers and logic made sense to me, whereas people rarely did. When I officially became a CPA at age 26, I called my parents, hoping for a sliver of pride. My dad's immediate response? "So, when are you going to settle down and get married like your sister?" Melody had tied the knot with her husband, Derek Cole, at 24 and popped out 2 kids by 28. My parents practically bankrolled their early 20s, subsidizing their rent for 5 solid years. Every single month, a check was written, no strings attached. Meanwhile, I graduated burdened with student loans and scraped by to pay off every single dime myself. Nobody offered a handout. Nobody even asked if I was struggling. The holiday script never changed. Mom would bounce one of Melody's toddlers on her knee, then shoot me this distinctly pitiful glare, the kind that silently communicated I was fundamentally broken. "You really need to take notes from your sister," she'd sigh, patting my shoulder like I was a lost cause she was reluctantly tolerating. "Melody just knows how to make people love her." I gave up seeking their approval right around the time I accepted that no degree or promotion would ever earn it. The goalposts were always different for me. I just never comprehended exactly how different until my family needed to extract something from me. My transition into the selfish sister was a slow burn until it became an inferno. It kicked off about 3 years ago when Melody phoned me up, begging for a $15,000 loan. She claimed her old car's transmission was shot and Derek's salary just wasn't cutting it anymore. She swore up and down she'd reimburse me within 6 months. I told her no. It wasn't a matter of lacking the funds, it was the fact that she was still sitting on an $8,000 debt from the last time I bailed her out, money that vanished into the ether without so much as a thank you. Mom called me later that evening, sobbing hysterically into the receiver. "How can you be so heartless to your own flesh and blood?" Half a year later, Melody came knocking again, this time needing a guarantor for a new apartment lease because her credit score was in the gutter. Again, I refused. I laid it out clearly, explaining that co-signing is a heavy legal burden and if she missed a payment, my finances would be on the hook. My dad's reaction was a punishing 3-week freeze-out. Total radio silence. The climax of this era was my nephew's 5th birthday. I was drowning in a massive corporate audit, and skipping work meant putting my career in jeopardy. I couldn't go. I mailed a generous present and called to express my regrets. That very evening, Melody took to Facebook. Family should always come first. It's heartbreaking when certain people lose sight of that. It racked up 47 likes and a dozen validating comments. Aunt Patricia chimed in with, "Some folks are just wired to only care about themselves." That was the turning point. I started keeping receipts. Every text, every absurd demand, every subsequent guilt trip went straight into a digital folder labeled Family Requests. I didn't do it to be petty. I did it because when you are perpetually gaslit by the people who raised you, you desperately need a paper trail to remind yourself you aren't losing your mind. That little folder was about to become my ultimate lifeline, even if I didn't know it yet. The envelope that started the nightmare looked completely benign. Standard institutional branding, my name typed out in that sterile banking font. I was half a second away from tossing it into the recycling bin. But the bold red letters caught my eye. Second notice. Mortgage payment overdue. The property was listed as 4847 Willowbrook Lane, Lakewood, Colorado. I blinked at the paper. I didn't know any Willowbrook Lane. I'd certainly never been to Lakewood. My blood turned to ice water as my eyes scanned down to the total. Outstanding balance, $682,000. Cosigner, Sienna M. Brennan. I dialed the bank's customer service line in a blind panic. The woman on the other end was incredibly polite, entirely clueless that she was acting as the executioner of my reality. "Yes, Ms. Brennan, you're officially documented as the cosigner on this home loan. The account has been active for 14 months. The primary account holders are Harold Brennan and Melody Brennan Cole." "There is a massive error here," I stammered, my voice completely alien to my own ears. "I never put my name on anything." "I'm looking directly at the application file, ma'am. Your signature is authorized." The paperwork was legally notarized on September 15, 2023. Notarized. That meant a supposedly sworn official had physically watched someone put ink to paper and certified it as the truth. A signature I never provided, for a six-figure debt I never authorized, for a sister who never even brought it up. While still on the line, I frantically pulled my credit report. And there it was. A gigantic, $682,000 anvil tied to my financial identity, silently tanking my credit score for over a year while I was completely oblivious. The mailing address linked to the debt was my parents' house, a place I hadn't resided in for 10 years. I mumbled a thank you to the agent and disconnected. For 10 solid minutes, I just sat at my table, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of my family's betrayal. I called my mother that night. Her exact phrasing is permanently burned into my brain. She picked up after 3 rings, her tone sickeningly sweet. "Sienna, what a lovely surprise. We were literally just talking about you. Did you forge my name on a mortgage?" Dead silence. 3 seconds passed. Then 4. It felt like an absolute eternity. We were planning on telling you." Her voice instantly shifted, losing its breezy quality and becoming highly defensive. "Telling me what, Mom?" I heard a muffled shuffling, my dad grumbling in the background, and then he snatched the receiver. "Listen, this is family business, Sienna," Dad barked. "Melody desperately needed this house. You have a lucrative career. We decided you should help." "You decided?" I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Without even consulting me? You committed fraud. We clothed you. We fed you. We raised you," he shot back. "Stepping up is what family does. I paid my own way through college. Every single penny." I yelled. "You bankrolled Melody's entire existence. That's entirely different. You were always a difficult child." I heard Mom yank the phone back. She deployed her ultimate weapon, the impending tears voice. "If you actually cared about us, Sienna, you wouldn't be making this such a nightmare." "Making what a nightmare?" "You stole my identity." Dad was back on the line, audibly aggravated now. "Stop being so dramatic. We just put your name on a few dotted lines. It's not illegal when it's family. It literally is a federal crime. We are broke, Sienna. His voice suddenly fractured. It was the first time in 32 years I'd heard him admit financial defeat. We liquidated our entire retirement fund for Melody's down payment. If this house goes into foreclosure, we have absolutely nothing left. And there was the ugly truth. They had gambled their entire life savings on Melody's suburban fantasy and automatically designated me as their insurance policy. You're 32 years old, Dad spat out. No husband, no kids. What could you possibly even need that kind of money for anyway? I hung up. Some questions are so deeply insulting they don't warrant a breath of response. Sleep was completely off the table that night. Instead, I dove into the logistics, and the reality was terrifying. If this loan defaulted, my credit would be radioactive for at least 7 years. I'd face aggressive collections, bank lawsuits, and the potential ruin of my career. Accounting firms routinely run intense background checks. A massive foreclosure would render me unemployable in my field. This wasn't just a stolen sum of money. This was an assassination of my future. At 2 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Marcus Webb. We had suffered through brutal accounting exams together back in college before he pivoted into real estate law, eventually specializing in property disputes and mortgage fraud. Sienna, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Do you know what time it is? I know, Marcus. I'm so sorry, but I need a lawyer. I unloaded the entire saga. The overdue letter, the banking call, and my parents' bold confession of forging my signature. If you didn't physically sign that paper, Marcus said, suddenly wide awake and deeply serious, this is textbook identity theft and forgery. This is major felony territory. What is our first move? Step 1. Demand the full paper trail. The application, the notary stamps, everything. Federal law guarantees your right to those files. Step 2. Do you have any shred of documented proof that you actively refuse to be tied to her finances? My mind flashed to my digital archive. 3 years ago, Melody asked me to co-sign an apartment. I emailed her a flat-out rejection. I stated in writing that I would never, ever co-sign any financial document for her. Send that to me immediately, Marcus commanded, his tone razor-sharp. That is the exact ammunition we need. Before we hung up, Marcus told me something profound. Your signature represents your honor. When someone fakes it, they aren't just taking your credit, they're attempting to steal your integrity. At 3 a.m., I unearthed that old email, read it over, and sent it to Marcus's inbox. 2 weeks later, the Thanksgiving holiday rolled around. I made the drive to my parents' house, not out of any desire for turkey, but because I needed to look them directly in the eyes when I drew my line in the sand. Pulling up, my stomach dropped. The driveway was packed with unfamiliar vehicles. Walking through the front door, I realized this wasn't a holiday meal, it was a firing squad. It wasn't just Mom, Dad, and Melody. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Ronnie, Grandma Ellen, and 3 distant cousins were all hovering around the dining room. The table was set for 12 people. Melody was the first to stand, her arms tightly folded. I think we all know why we're gathered here. Dad pointed to an empty chair. Sit down, Sienna. We're having a family discussion. About what? I remained standing, gripping my purse. Your sister's family needs this roof over their heads. This family expects you to step up to the plate. Aunt Patricia sneered from the corner. You have always been the incredibly selfish one, Sienna. Here is your golden opportunity to finally prove us wrong. Every eye in the room was locked onto me. The atmospheric pressure was suffocating, like the dead air right before a tornado touches down. I never signed those mortgage papers, I stated, my voice remarkably unwavering. Melody's eyes flashed with anger. You explicitly told us you would help. Really? Give me a specific date. Christmas dinner. 2 years ago. You sat at this very table and said you would consider it. Saying I would think about it is not authorizing a mortgage. You nodded your head. Melody shrieked, her voice echoing off the walls. Everybody in this room saw you nod. A head nod is not a legally binding contract. It absolutely is in this family. Well, this family has a remarkably unhinged interpretation of consent, I shot back. Uncle Ronnie began muttering under his breath about how entitled my generation was. Grandma Ellen dramatically dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Mom turned on the waterworks, utilizing her highly practiced weeping to paint me as the monster. Dad violently pushed his chair back and stood up. The room instantly fell dead silent. Then you leave us absolutely no choice. The threat hung heavily in the dining room. No choice about what? I challenged. Dad gave me that terrifyingly rigid look, the one that signaled his mind was made up and nothing on earth could sway him. We are giving you until December 15th. You either formally agree to take over the mortgage payments, or we are taking you to court. The floor felt like it was shifting beneath my boots. You are going to sue me? Your own child? On what grounds? Breach of a verbal contract, he stated coldly. Melody is our star witness. She will testify under oath that you pledged your financial support. I shifted my gaze to my sister. She refused to make eye contact, instead wrapping her arms around her torso, slipping effortlessly into her favorite role of the helpless victim. You are going to commit perjury? I asked her. You're going to lie to a judge? It's not perjury if that's how I remember the conversation happening, she mumbled defensively. Mom practically lunged at me, clutching my wrists with her damp hands. Sienna, I am begging you. We gave you life. How could you possibly do this to us? You committed identity fraud, Mom. You forged my signature, and you have the audacity to ask what I am doing to you. It is family money. It doesn't count as stealing when it's within the family. I ripped my arms away, her touch making my skin crawl. Down at the far end of the long table sat Grandpa Harold. He was 84 and hadn't muttered a single syllable during the entire spectacle. He possessed a quiet demeanor that always radiated a quiet wisdom rather than passivity. Our eyes locked. He wasn't glaring at me. He wasn't judging me. The look in his eyes was pure, unfiltered pity. December 15th, Dad reiterated. You have exactly 3 weeks to fall in line. I grabbed my winter coat and my car keys, scraping together whatever dignity I had left. I will see you all in court. As I walked out the door, the chaos erupted behind me. Mom wailed loudly. Aunt Patricia yelled that I was a soulless brat, but not a single person offered an ounce of remorse. Yet, it was Grandpa Harold's face that occupied my thoughts for the entire drive back. I knew he was holding onto a secret. I was just unlocking my car when I heard a distinct scraping sound on the driveway concrete. I turned to see Grandpa Harold shuffling toward me, leaning heavily on his wooden cane. The bitter November wind carried the scent of wood smoke. He was panting slightly from the exertion. My 84-year-old grandfather was the only person willing to chase me out into the freezing cold. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, I whispered. I just can't be in that house anymore. I don't blame you, he wheezed, catching his breath. His eyes were incredibly sharp, unclouded by the delusion the rest of them shared. You shouldn't stay. Did you know what they did with the mortgage? He paused, leaning on his cane. I only found out after the fact. I tried to talk some sense into your stubborn father, but you know Harold. He never listens to anyone. Hearing that validation felt like a physical weight lifting off my ribs. For decades, I had quietly wondered if I was the villain, if my desire for personal boundaries meant I was defective. And here was the patriarch of the family confirming I was sane. He gripped my forearm tightly. Pay very close attention to the notary date, he murmured. Look at the official documents. Something in the timeline doesn't line up. What exactly do you mean? Just check the dates, he urged, patting my arm. And Sienna? Your grandmother Ruth would be incredibly proud of you for holding your ground today. She never had the courage to do it with my father, and she regretted it until she died. Grandma Ruth had passed away 8 years prior. I remembered her as a profoundly gentle woman drowning in a sea of aggressively loud relatives. I gave him a very careful, tender hug, feeling his fragile frame through his heavy wool coat. Then I climbed into my car and drove away in total silence. I didn't turn on the radio. It was just the hum of the tires and the deep, hollow ache of walking away from a family that never really wanted me anyway. That evening, I cracked open my laptop and started investigating. Grandpa Harold had handed me the key, and I was going to unlock the whole conspiracy. Before we continue, if you have ever been painted as the ultimate villain by your own relatives simply for establishing a boundary, I want to read your story. Drop it in the comments below. It helps to know we aren't enduring these things alone. And if my journey is striking a chord with you, Hitting the like button really helps push this video to others who might need to hear it. Now, let me reveal exactly what I uncovered when I put that paperwork under a microscope. Because my grandfather was absolutely spot on, something was catastrophically wrong. Federal regulations guarantee individuals the right to obtain any financial contract bearing their name. I submitted the official requests immediately. 10 days later, a thick manila envelope from the bank arrived. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for a solid minute, terrified to open it. The contents were either going to confirm my darkest suspicions or prove this was all an insane misunderstanding. It was no misunderstanding. The mortgage file was a dense 12 pages, and my supposedly authorized signature graced 3 of them. I laid the papers under the bright glare of my desk lamp and held my actual driver's license up next to them. The forgery was decently executed, but flawed. When I write my name, the top loop of my S hooks backward, a messy habit I picked up from rushing through hundreds of tax returns. The S on these legal documents swooped forward. It was bubbly and deliberate. It was the handwriting of someone who had seen my signature, but lacked the muscle memory to replicate it properly. Then my eyes darted to the notary stamp. September 15, 2023. My heart did a backflip. I frantically opened my digital calendar, scrolling back to that exact week. There it was, blocked out in bright blue, September 14th to 17th, AISPA National Accounting Conference, Seattle, Washington. I had been sitting in a convention center over 800 miles away on the exact day this document was supposedly signed in person in Colorado. I had the digital breadcrumbs to prove it, airline boarding passes, hotel folios, and an Instagram selfie of me and 2 coworkers posing in front of the Space Needle. The photo was timestamped September 15th at 4:47 p.m. The notarized document explicitly claimed I was physically present in a room in Colorado, presenting ID to an official on a day I wasn't even within the state lines. My dad had forged the signature, and some corrupt notary had stamped a massive lie. I instantly emailed the entire cache of evidence to Marcus. 3 minutes later, my phone lit up with his reply. This is the Holy Grail. We are no longer playing defense. We are going for the throat. Marcus immediately filed a legal subpoena demanding First Mountain Bank hand over all internal communications connected to the Willowbrook Lane property. Because we were preparing a fraud counterclaim, we had full legal rights to the file. Given the severity of the allegations, the bank's legal department surrendered the records in under 2 weeks. What we found in that file blew the lid off the entire operation. Marcus called me on a Tuesday night, his voice practically vibrating with adrenaline. Sienna, are you sitting down? You need to hear this. Just read it, Marcus. We got our hands on an email thread between your sister and the bank's loan officer, a guy named Kevin Torres. He cleared his throat and read the timeline. Email 1 from Melody. Is there any possible loophole to add my sister to this mortgage without her physical presence? She is currently out of state for a work conference and cannot attend the closing. Email 2, Kevin Torres replying, if you possess a valid power of attorney or she can utilize our verified remote signing portal, we can make it work. Otherwise, she legally must be present for the notary. Email 3 from Melody, remote signing won't work. The Wi-Fi at her conference is terrible. However, my dad can handle all the physical paperwork on her behalf. Will that suffice? Email 4, the final nail in the coffin from Kevin. As long as the final documents are properly stamped by a licensed notary, we can push the application through. As long as the documents are properly notarized, Marcus echoed in disbelief. This Kevin guy essentially gave them a wink and a nod. He willfully bypassed protocol, completely neglected to verify your consent, and let your father run the show. It is a catastrophic regulatory breach. I stared blankly at my apartment wall. Listening to those emails felt like watching a security tape of my own house, being robbed by people smiling at the camera, utterly convinced they were untouchable. Marcus strongly urged me to go to the authorities. Filing a criminal report for identity theft and forgery would lock in an undeniable police record, drastically strengthening our position in the impending civil suit. That Wednesday, I marched into the Denver police precinct and handed over a massive binder. Flight itineraries, hotel bills, the forged mortgage pages, and the damning email thread. The desk officer was professional, but didn't promise the moon. "We will be in touch," she noted. I wasn't holding my breath. But a week later, my caller ID flashed an unknown Denver number. "Ms. Brennan? This is Detective Carla Nguyen with the Financial Crimes Division." I almost dropped my mug of coffee. "I've scrutinized your evidence binder," the detective stated smoothly. "Based on the documentation, the department is officially launching an investigation into felony identity theft and mortgage fraud. We will be bringing in the notary public for questioning, as well as the loan officer. We are also issuing warrants for the bank's extended files." She took a brief pause. "Ms. Brennan, mortgage fraud is severely punished. Are you fully aware of the implications?" "I am." Her next question caught me off guard. "Do you honestly believe your family members comprehended that their actions were highly illegal?" The inquiry stung, not because the truth was blurry, but because verbalizing it made the betrayal so intensely real. "I don't think they cared," I whispered into the phone. "They desperately needed funding. They viewed my credit as an ATM. Whether they were breaking federal laws or destroying my livelihood was totally irrelevant to them getting their way." Detective Nguyen sighed softly. "We will keep you updated. In the meantime, archive every single text or email your family sends you. They're about to become highly relevant." I didn't need to be told twice. I'd been archiving their toxicity for years. On December 20th, right before the holidays, a process server tracked me down at my accounting firm. She was completely deadpan, handing over a thick manila folder like she was delivering a pizza. "Sienna Brennan? Consider yourself officially served." The header read, "Harold Brennan and Diane Brennan versus Sienna Brennan. Filed in Douglas County Civil Court." The damages? A staggering $682,000, plus all attorney and court fees. The lawsuit was an 8-page work of fiction. The charges were breach of oral contract and unjust enrichment. They boldly alleged that I had made a firm verbal commitment to assume the mortgage, then maliciously backed out, inflicting profound emotional and financial devastation upon them. Melody was listed as the star witness, ready to swear on a Bible that my head nod at a dinner table was an unbreakable blood oath. I sat in my office with the door locked, reading the absurdity. My own parents had secured a high-priced downtown litigator to force a judge to make me pay for a house I had never stepped foot in. I speed-dialed Marcus. "I got the papers." "Right on schedule," he replied coolly. "Notice anything missing from their complaint?" "They completely omitted the mortgage signature." "Exactly. The entire lawsuit hinges on a phantom verbal agreement because they are terrified of the paper trail. They are desperately trying to avoid the forgery." "Is their strategy going to work?" "Not a chance," Marcus laughed. "Because we are going to shove the paperwork right down their throats." But the courtroom wasn't their only battlefield. My family took to the court of public opinion. Melody fired the first shot on Facebook, drafting a masterful, tear-jerking manifesto. It shatters my heart that some individuals prioritize money over their own flesh and blood. I never imagined my own sister would sit back and watch our elderly parents face the loss of their life savings over sheer pride. "Please keep our family in your prayers during this nightmare." It exploded. 347 reactions, almost 100 comments. Extended relatives and people I hadn't seen since high school flooded the post to shower her with sympathy while tearing me apart. Aunt Patricia commented, "Sending prayers, honey. Sometimes people's true, ugly colors eventually shine through." Cousin Rachel added, "Family is everything." It's truly pathetic when someone forgets where they came from. A childhood friend texted me a screenshot of the carnage. "Are you seeing this? The whole town is talking about you." I saw it all. I watched them construct the narrative in real time. Sienna the Ice Queen. Sienna the traitor. What they conveniently left out of their sob story was the felony identity theft, the forged documents, and the fact that I was actively fighting for my financial life. I typed out a furious, evidence-backed rebuttal, hovered over the post button, and then deleted it. Marcus had explicitly warned me against social media warfare. You can't win a mudslinging contest, and any emotional outburst could be twisted by their lawyer. The only audience that actually mattered wore a black robe. So, I swallowed my pride and stayed entirely silent, watching my reputation burn to the ground, surrounded by relatives who never once bothered to ask for my version of events. Christmas Day crept up on me. I was so buried in legal strategy and evidence gathering that the holiday barely registered. I only realized what day it was when I opened Instagram and saw a story posted by my nephew, Tyler. It was a picturesque wide shot of the entire Brennan clan packed into my parents' living room. Everyone was donning matching flannel pajamas. Mom, Dad, Melody, Derek, the kids, Aunt Patricia holding a massive goblet of wine, and Grandpa Harold nestled in his favorite recliner. I was the only ghost. I hadn't received a phone call, a text message, or an invitation. They had surgically excised me from the family tree. I watched the short clip loop over and over, analyzing their joyful, relaxed faces. It was a flawless theatrical performance of family unity, bonded together by their shared hatred of me. Mom sent a single, venomous text later that night. "You chose this isolation. Never forget that." I didn't bother typing a reply. I ate takeout Thai food alone on my sofa, sipping cheap wine, surrounded by legal binders instead of wrapping paper. Around 9 o'clock, my phone illuminated. I had a direct message on Instagram from Grandpa Harold's account. He barely knew how to unlock an iPad, so someone must have secretly helped him. "I am so sorry, kiddo. I tried to make them stop, but they are blind. Merry Christmas, Sienna." That was the first time I actually broke down and cried. I didn't cry because I missed the party. I cried because out of that entire house of frauds, one single person saw my humanity. One person knew I was innocent and had the sheer decency to say it. March 3rd finally arrived. It was 8:47 a.m. at the Douglas County Courthouse. I showed up early, dressed in my sharpest charcoal suit, the one that made me feel like corporate armor. I made sure my hair was flawless and my posture was rigid. I flat out refused to let them see me sweat. The corridors smelled like lemon polish and old paper. Marcus was waiting outside courtroom 2B, looking like a shark in a tailored navy suit, tightly gripping his leather briefcase. "How is the heart rate?" he asked. "I feel like I'm about to watch my entire bloodline commit perjury," I replied dryly. "They absolutely will. And that's exactly why we brought the receipts." We took our seats at the defense table. The room was intimate, with maybe 40 wooden chairs in the gallery. At 8:55 a.m., the plaintiff's party strutted in. Dad led the charge in a brand new suit, Mom clinging to his bicep like a distressed damsel. Melody followed, her eyes perfectly rimmed with red, whether from actual anxiety or tactical makeup, I couldn't be sure. Derek trailed behind her, his jaw clenched tight, aggressively avoiding my gaze. The gallery quickly populated with Aunt Patricia, Cousin Rachel, and a handful of other relatives who treated this like a spectator sport. They took their spots 20 feet away. Not a single one of them dared to make eye contact with me. "Remember," Marcus leaned over and whispered. "They only have a fairy tale. We have federal evidence." The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise." The Honorable Eleanor Price presiding. Judge Price took the bench. She was an imposing woman with severe silver hair and reading glasses balanced perfectly on the bridge of her nose. The showdown had officially begun. Mitchell Davidson, my parents' high-priced attorney, took the floor first. He paced confidently, flashing his expensive watch. "Your Honor, today we are dealing with a tragic case of broken familial promises. We are looking at a daughter who swore an oath to support her aging parents, only to vanish into the night when the financial reality set in." I kept my face completely paralyzed. "Give them nothing. We will submit testimony proving the defendant made a binding verbal contract to take over this mortgage. A promise witnessed by her own flesh and blood during a family gathering in 2022. Davidson immediately called Melody to the witness box. She practically floated to the stand, adopting a posture of pure, unadulterated victimhood. "Mrs. Brennan Cole," Davidson coaxed gently. "Take us back to that Christmas dinner." Melody sniffled perfectly on cue. We were all chatting about the insane housing market. My mother brought up how desperately they wanted to help me secure a safe home for my young children. "And how did the defendant respond?" she said. Melody choked back a fake sob. She said, "I will think about it." And then she nodded her head at us. The whole table saw her. And in your family dynamic, how is a nod interpreted? It means yes. It is an absolute agreement. That is just how we communicate. Dad was called up next. He recited the exact same heavily rehearsed narrative. She is my own daughter, he grumbled, projecting deep paternal sorrow. I sacrificed everything to raise her. I never dreamed she would stab us in the back like this. Through the entirety of their opening, Davidson never once uttered the word mortgage, application, or signature. The entire foundation of their lawsuit was built on a mythical head nod. They were dodging the paper trail like a minefield. When it was our turn, Marcus stood up with terrifying slowness. He let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client never entered into any agreement, verbal or otherwise. Acknowledging a conversation by saying, "I'll think about it," is not a legally binding contract. It is an evasion. Davidson squirmed in his chair. Melody stared intensely at her cuticles. But more importantly, Marcus's voice echoed loudly. Even if we entertain this fantasy of a verbal contract, it is entirely irrelevant. Why? Because there is a physical, signed mortgage document in existence, a document my client never touched. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. The defense wishes to enter Exhibit A, the mortgage application for the Willowbrook Lane property, displaying Sienna Brennan as the primary cosigner. Marcus handed copies to the bailiff and Davidson. And we submit Exhibit B, comprehensive flight itineraries, hotel folios, and digital metadata proving unequivocally that my client was physically located in Seattle, Washington on the exact afternoon this document was allegedly signed and notarized in Colorado. Judge Price peered over her glasses, her stoic expression finally cracking. Mr. Webb, are you actively accusing the plaintiffs of felony forgery? I am not accusing, Your Honor. I am providing the proof. Marcus fired up the courtroom projector. The forged signature was magnified onto a massive screen. Ms. Brennan, Marcus addressed me. Is that your handwriting? I stood up straight. No, it is not. Could you please demonstrate your actual signature for the court? 3 times on this pad. I walked up to the clerk's desk, grabbed a pen, and effortlessly signed my name. The backwards S, the distinct loop on the B. Marcus slapped my authentic signatures onto the projector right next to the bank docs. The forgery was glaringly obvious. The counterfeit S leaned forward like a dying tree. The signature on the bank document curves forward, Marcus declared. My client's physiological muscle memory curves backward. Sienna Brennan did not sign this paperwork. Someone in this room did. I clearly heard Aunt Patricia let out a horrified wheeze from the back row. Okay, let's pause for a second because the energy in that room just completely flipped. If you are still watching, I have to ask, if you were in my shoes, would you have buckled under the pressure to keep the family intact, or would you have nuked them in court like I did? Tell me in the comments. And if you are desperate to hear how the judge reacted to this bombshell, make sure you are subscribed. Let's get back to the trial, because Marcus was far from finished. Marcus calmly reached into his leather briefcase and extracted a fresh manila folder. Your Honor, the defense submits Exhibit C, a verified email exchange between the plaintiff's star witness, Melody Brennan Cole, and First Mountain Bank loan officer Kevin Torres. Davidson shot up like a rocket. Objection. Relevance. These communications establish premeditated intent to bypass my client's physical presence and commit identity fraud, Marcus fired back. They're the bedrock of our defense. Judge Price aggressively waved Davidson down. Overruled. Read the emails, Mr. Webb. Marcus began reading, his voice slicing through the room like a scalpel. Email from Melody Brennan Cole, dated September 10th. Is there any way to add my sister to the application without her being physically present? She is traveling for work. I watched the color completely drain from Melody's face. Derek violently snapped his neck to stare at his wife. Reply from Kevin Torres, Marcus continued. If someone else handles the paperwork, we can process it, as long as the documents are properly notarized. Final email from Mrs. Cole. She cannot do remote signing. She is at a conference. But my dad can handle the paperwork on her behalf. The gallery exploded into frantic whispers. Aunt Patricia slapped both hands over her mouth. Dad's face morphed from pale to a dangerous shade of crimson. Marcus slowly turned to face my sister. Mrs. Cole, did you draft these emails to the bank? Objection, Davidson yelled. Overruled, Judge Price barked. Melody practically collapsed into the microphone, her voice a high-pitched squeak of panic. I thought it was completely legal. My dad told me he was going to take care of all the logistics. She had just thrown our father under a fleet of buses in front of a sitting judge. Dad's jaw hit the floor. Melody, he roared. He told me it was fine, she sobbed hysterically, abandoning all loyalty. He promised me Sienna would never even find out. Derek suddenly stood up, hyperventilating. He looked at Melody like she had suddenly morphed into a flesh-eating monster. He sat heavily back down, putting his head between his knees. Bang! Judge Price slammed her gavel with terrifying force. Order! I will have absolute order in my courtroom. But the nuke had already detonated. The truth was out. Judge Price slowly removed her glasses and set them gently on her desk. The silence in the room was deafening. I have thoroughly reviewed the plaintiff's ridiculous complaint, she began, her voice dripping with venom. You attempted to utilize a mythical head nod to extort $682,000 from the defendant. She glared directly at my cowering parents. I have also reviewed the defense's ironclad evidence. Flight records proving an impossible geography. Signature analysis demonstrating blatant forgery. And written confessions proving a conspiracy to commit identity theft. Mom began weeping, and this time, the tears were 100% genuine terror. This legal institution is not a weapon for you to enforce your toxic family dynamics, Judge Price scolded. This court enforces the law, and the evidence strongly indicates that the plaintiffs fraudulently hijacked the defendant's identity to secure a massive loan. She gathered her files and squared them off. I am dismissing this absurd lawsuit with extreme prejudice. Down came the gavel. Furthermore, she added coldly, I am officially forwarding all exhibits, including the forged mortgage and email threads, directly to the district attorney's office to evaluate criminal fraud charges. Aunt Patricia gasped so loudly it echoed. Dad gripped the mahogany table so hard his knuckles were white. Melody just buried her face in her lap and wailed. The word dismissed rang in my ears like a beautiful symphony. For the first time in 6 agonizing months, oxygen actually reached my lungs. But the slaughter wasn't over. Marcus immediately stood tall. Your Honor, while the plaintiff's circus is dismissed, my client's counterclaim is fully active. Proceed, Mr. Webb, the judge nodded approvingly. Sienna Brennan is actively countersuing Harold Brennan, Diane Brennan, and Melody Brennan Cole for felony identity fraud, malicious forgery, and severe damages to her professional and financial reputation. We are demanding the immediate expungement of her name from the property title, full reimbursement of $23,000 in legal fees, and punitive damages for the devastation of her credit score, which threatened her CPA licensure. A man in a sharp gray suit stood up from the back row. Your Honor, I represent First Mountain Bank. We pledge our total cooperation. Our internal auditing team is already aggressively investigating the misconduct of our loan officer regarding this file. Judge Price scribbled furiously on her notepad. The counterclaim will advance to a formal hearing. However, based on the smoking guns presented today, I am ordering an emergency injunction on the Willowbrook title. If the forgery is formally authenticated, the defendant's liabilities will be zeroed out immediately. The judge then locked eyes with me. Ms. Brennan, do you have anything you wish to put on the record? I stood up. My knees were surprisingly stable. I looked at the pathetic lineup at the plaintiff's table. My parents. My sister. The relatives who had showed up with popcorn to watch my execution. I never asked for any of this, I stated, my voice echoing clearly through the silent room. I never consented to a mortgage. I never asked to be dragged into court by my own flesh and blood. You all consciously chose to do this instead of simply saying you were sorry. I hope you remember that. I sat down. It wasn't a movie monologue, but the pure, unfiltered truth is often the most devastating weapon you can wield. The bailiff called a recess. The courtroom frantically emptied. I packed my folders away slowly, letting the victory wash over me. We had crushed them. The legal counterstrike still had to play out, but their offensive line was completely obliterated. Their attempt to use the justice system as a club had spectacularly backfired. "You did fantastic up there," Marcus smiled, packing his briefcase. I just told the truth. Oddly enough, that was the hardest part. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors into the hallway corridor. The fluorescent lights felt weirdly angelic now. Grandpa Harold was standing by the massive window, looking incredibly exhausted, but when he saw my face, his whole demeanor lifted. "I am so proud of you, Sienna," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Your grandmother is smiling down right now. Thank you for taking my advice about the notary stamp. It was the key to everything. I couldn't have done it without you." Suddenly, rapid, aggressive footsteps echoed behind us. Melody burst through the courtroom doors, followed closely by a red-faced Derek. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in thick black rivers. "You completely destroyed our family," she screamed, lunging toward me. I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn to face her. Derek's booming voice cut through the air, but he wasn't yelling at me. "You lied to my face," he bellowed at Melody. "You swore to God she agreed to this. You told me the paperwork was completely legitimate." "Derek, please, I can explain everything," Melody begged, grabbing his jacket. "Explain what?" he roared. "I just watched you admit to a federal judge that you conspired to forge your own sister's name. Get off of me." I just kept walking toward the elevators. The sounds of their screaming match echoed down the tile hallway, the horrific soundtrack of a marriage completely detonating under the pressure of its own lies. Marcus caught up with me right as the elevator dinged. Well, that was certainly explosive. I stepped into the cab and pressed the lobby button. Was it a win, Marcus? My parents tried to financially ruin me. My sister committed perjury to destroy me. I had to prove I wasn't a criminal in front of my entire family. He didn't have an optimistic comeback for that. Neither did I. Over the next 2 months, the dominoes fell rapidly. First Mountain Bank concluded their probe. Loan officer Kevin Torres was found guilty of catastrophic compliance failures, ignoring identity verification protocols, and actively facilitating unverified documents. He was unceremoniously fired, and the memo mysteriously leaked its way to Marcus's desk. The notary, a guy named Gary Peterson, turned out to be an old buddy from my dad's Thursday night bowling league. He had illegally stamped the papers in my parents' living room while I was safely tucked away in a Seattle hotel. The Colorado State Board permanently stripped his notary license. True to the judge's word, my name was entirely scrubbed from the Willowbrook mortgage. The massive debt vanished from my credit report as if it were a hallucination, and my pristine CPA credit score bounced back within 90 days. The district attorney's office eventually reviewed the fraud referral, but opted against criminal felony charges. Because it was a first-time offense, classified as an inter-family dispute, and there was no proven intent to permanently defraud the banking institution itself, they let them walk. However, my parents and sister were slapped with massive civil penalties and formal federal warnings that would red flag them for the rest of their lives. My civil counterclaim was settled before we even saw the inside of a courtroom again. They completely caved, agreeing to pay my $23,000 in legal fees in one lump sum. It was never about cashing a check. It was about forcing them to take accountability. There was no victory party. You don't celebrate surviving a car crash. My blood relatives had committed a felony, dragged me through a traumatic legal gauntlet, and assassinated my character, and their only real punishment was a financial slap on the wrist. But I had my identity back. I had my flawless reputation back. Sometimes, survival is the only trophy you get, and you just have to accept it. The Brennan family unit completely imploded. Melody and Derek legally separated exactly 3 months after the gavel dropped. He packed his bags, moved out of the fraudulent Willowbrook house, and filed for split custody. A mutual friend told me Derek explicitly stated he could never sleep next to a woman capable of doing that to her own sister. With my 6-figure credit profile removed from the equation, my parents couldn't mathematically sustain the mortgage payments. Since they had already liquidated their retirement accounts to secure the down payment, they had no safety net. The house was sold at a massive loss, and they were forced to downsize into a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they used to arrogantly turn their noses up at. Mom sent me exactly one email after the dust settled. It was just 4 words: "You ruined our lives." I sent it straight to the trash bin. Some statements are so deeply delusional they require zero response. In April, my phone rang with Aunt Patricia's number. Her voice lacked its usual booming arrogance. She sounded tiny. "Sienna." I had no idea about the emails or the forged signatures. I just blindly swallowed whatever Melody told us. "I am deeply sorry. I should have come to you directly for the truth." I let the silence hang for a few seconds. It was the apology I had completely written off. "I appreciate you saying that, Patricia," I replied softly, and then I hung up. One meager apology didn't magically erase the public humiliation, but it was nice to know that the fog of delusion was finally lifting for some of them. That spring, Grandpa Harold mailed me a physical, handwritten letter. His script was incredibly shaky, but the message was crystal clear. "I have formally revised my last will and testament. You are fully taken care of, Sienna. You deserve to have at least one person in this family actively looking out for you." He passed away peacefully in his sleep 6 weeks later. I attended the funeral, sitting entirely by myself in the very back pew. Nobody dared to approach me, but my presence was a quiet tribute to the only man who had my back. And that was enough. It's been exactly 6 months since the trial concluded, and my reality is entirely unrecognizable. I was promoted to senior accountant at my firm. When my boss handed me the new title, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I have watched executives mentally shatter under half the stress you endured this year. You are made of titanium." I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ree. Not because I felt shattered, but because I needed to unpack my own history. Why did I tolerate being the family punching bag for 32 years? Why did I persistently show up to holiday dinners just to be mocked? Dr. Ree dropped a piece of wisdom that completely rewired my brain. She said, "Sometimes, the people who are biologically mandated to protect us end up teaching us to tolerate horrific abuse." True healing is actively unlearning that tolerance. I am currently unlearning. In a final act of closure, I legally changed my surname to Burke, my mother's maiden name, before she was absorbed into the Brennan toxicity. It felt incredibly empowering. It was my way of honoring my roots while completely severing ties with the people who poisoned them. My inner circle is small now, but it is fiercely loyal. I surround myself with friends who never weaponize my boundaries. Marcus and I grab coffee every other Sunday. He saved my professional and financial life, and now we just laugh about terrible legal dramas on Netflix. We never bring up my family unless I initiate the topic. The profound silence of my new life took some major adjustment. My phone doesn't ring with manufactured financial emergencies anymore. There are no more guilt-tripping text messages. There are no more agonizing holidays where I feel completely isolated in a room full of my own DNA. Now, there is just an overwhelming, beautiful peace. Just last month, under Dr. Ree's guidance, I wrote a massive letter to my parents. The goal wasn't to mail it, but to physically extract the poison from my system. I sat at my kitchen island and just let the ink bleed. "Mom and Dad, I loved you so much. I wasted 3 decades bending over backwards to earn the basic affection you handed to Melody for free. I achieved more, demanded less, and was still treated like a burden. When I set a boundary, you labeled it betrayal. When I succeeded, you saw an ATM. When I defended my life, you called me a villain. I didn't shatter this family, your lies did. You chose to steal my identity rather than respect my autonomy. I deserved a family that asked, not one that robbed. I may forgive you down the line, but I am entirely done waiting for an apology that will never arrive. I am finally at peace, and I am finding it far away from you. Sienna." I read the letter out loud 3 times, letting all the repressed grief, fury, and immense relief wash over me. And then, I dragged the file into the digital trash bin and hit empty. Dr. Ree was absolutely right. The therapeutic value was in the declaration, not the delivery. True closure isn't always wrapped in a tearful apology from your abusers. Sometimes, closure is simply accepting that they are incapable of giving one. I shut my laptop, poured myself a generous glass of Pinot Noir and watched the Denver skyline light up. Nobody was going to swoop in and undo the trauma. But I had survived the fire, and I was still standing tall. That was my victory. Today is just a wonderfully mundane Saturday. I am lounging in my living room, the afternoon sun warming the hardwood floors. I have a hot cup of coffee, a novel I'm finally going to finish, and the kind of total silence that used to trigger my anxiety, but now feels like pure liberation. My phone vibrates on the coffee table. It's a text from Marcus. Coffee tomorrow morning? Bring your usual brutal honesty. I smile and type back, always. Sometimes my mind drifts back to the question my dad viciously spit at me over the phone. What could you possibly even need that kind of money for anyway? I finally have the perfect answer. I needed to build a fortress where nobody can ever exploit me again. I needed to fund a life where no is my favorite complete sentence. I need it for perfectly quiet, unbothered mornings just like this one. Sitting on my bookshelf is a brand new silver frame. Inside is a candid photo of Grandpa Harold and me, snapped at a quiet diner during his final Christmas. We had snuck away from the toxic family gathering just to breathe, and a waitress offered to take our picture. He is beaming in the photo, a genuine, unburdened smile. On the back of the frame, I taped a note he had scribbled to me. It reads, "The most powerful people on earth are the ones who know exactly when to walk away." I walked away. Not because I lacked love for them, but because I finally developed enough love for myself to demand better. They branded me as the selfish monster who prioritized cash over her own sister. But I didn't choose the money. I chose my integrity. I chose the undisputed right to own my signature, my credit score, and my future. Some families are designed to be your launchpad. Others are strictly designed to keep you tethered to the ground. My family taught me that documenting every transaction isn't paranoid, it's armor. They taught me that sharing a bloodline does not equate to sharing a soul. Sometimes, the family you are born into are your greatest enemies, and the family you choose to build becomes your entire world. I didn't win this war just because I hired a brilliant lawyer. I won because I fundamentally refused to believe I wasn't worth fighting for. If my journey struck a nerve with you, or if you have ever had to go to war to protect your own boundaries from the people who were supposed to shield you, I want to hear from you. Please leave your story in the comments below. I promise you, I read every single one. You are absolutely not alone. And if you love these deep dive stories of wild family drama and ultimate justice, make sure to check out the link in the description. There is an insane story waiting for you about a woman whose greedy in-laws attempted to hijack her entire inheritance, and you do not want to miss the twist at the end. Thank you so much for hanging out with me until the very end. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.